In today's video, I separate plastic better, make cockpit canopy thinner. Also, I try not to breathe. I make a mess on my table. In addition, I peel off the masking tape. I cover the nice paint job with a white paint. Last but not least, I create a minor weathering. Hello fellow modelers, let's dive into another legendary aircraft, and this time it is Junkers 87 Stuka. It earned its fame with a terrifying siren whale and combat successes. I chose the Hobby2000 kit, which is repackaged Academy. The G-2 version has a sprue with a large 37mm cannons. The plastic parts are nicely clean, they have a soft surface details, like soft panel lines and bolts. It includes a lovely cartograph decals and as a bonus, pre-cut mask for a fragmented cockpit canopy. At the recent model exhibition, I picked up a fantastic detail set from Ayers. This set offers new cockpit, engine and gun ports, though it looks a bit intricate for the scale. I separated parts from the sprue and checked the shape accuracy. A handy reference book from Kajiro has been a great help, as it includes detailed blueprints, complete with rivet placements. And I also have a few reference photos from RAF Museum. I checked the fuselage and immediately noticed that the rudder has an incorrect shape. Another issue I found is the engine cover, which is smaller in every dimension. The Stuka version has a larger wingspan, and it looks accurate. Another problem is the small and incorrectly shaped wheel pans. The blueprint indicates the sizes that are more in the line with the actual aircraft. I know this might sound tedious, but there is more to address. Another problem lies with the smaller propeller blades. Taking all these issues into account, I designed a 3D repair set. It may seem like a half of a kit, but at least the wings are accurate. You can notice how small and incorrect the parts from the kit are. After printing, I discovered that all the replacement parts already exist and are made by Quick Boost. So if you do not have a 3D printer, you can use these. As I already have detail set for the cockpit, I need to remove all the plastic details and thin down the edges of the fuselage. Handy is an electric grinder, but it is best to operate at low RPM, otherwise the friction can generate excess heat and damage the plastic. The kit fitting is quite impressive, even the wings have difficult double V shape. Cleaning all the resin parts took some time. I use a micro grinder, and for the finer details I rely on the sharp hobby blade. There are tiny metal parts for small details. Some of them are smaller than 1mm. I am creating cover glass with a clear varnish, but you can use UV resin as well. The instrument panel is usually very colorful. Handy is photo documentation. If you do not have a walk around publication, you can find many useful pictures online. Buttons, switches and indicators were yellow or red. The most challenging part was assembling the rudder pedals, which consist of 7 individual pieces. Small compression. The plastic isn't bad either, but the resin has more details. The primer helps to unify the surface and increase color adhesion. I used silver as a base layer for sketches. The cockpit was painted with a RLM 66, which is dark grey shade. However, it will optically kill all the details. Therefore, it's handy to spray highlights with a light grey shade. While some artificial shading occurs due to paint variations, I prefer using black wash to make the details stand out even more. You can notice many small wires and pipes. Modern acrylic paints have a high pigment content and good coverage, so there is no need to apply multiple layers of yellow. The acrylic colors are not resilient and you can easily peel them off with a toothpick on the base silver layer. You do not need chipping varnish for this effect. Given the size of the parts, handling them without right tools can be challenging. That is why I prefer using sharp tweezers. You do not need to make scratches with a toothpick and simply paint them with a silver paint. A brown wash can help tone down the shine of the yellow and bring out the details. I enjoy using these old school resin sets because they lack printing layers, ensuring everything is nicely clean. Only sometimes getting the proper fit can be a real headache. I am forced to thin down the resin and plastic to paper thickness. I prefer slow drying superglue because you have more time to correct the orientation. And I use extra thin glue to make a strong and flexible bond. The fitting with a resin cockpit is again problematic. I am removing more material from the both sides. This is much better. The modifications usually slightly alter the kit shape, but it is a standard issue. This is new 3D printed cover for the engine. I adjusted the width to match the size of the kit, so it should fit nicely. However, I don't need it, because I have a lovely resin engine. You can print the propeller in one piece, or as a separate components for better printing quality, but then can be tricky for assembling. So I find it necessary to use a blueprint. I also make sure to check the height of each propeller blade, as it's easy to end up with them at the wrong angle. I am shaping groove for rudder installation using a round metal file. The new shape is definitely an improvement. I recently started using this perfect putty. It is a mix of flexible superglue and CA filler. Mixing it with a powder achieves a denser consistency. Though the drying time is slower, it allows you more time for application, about 10 minutes. For thicker layers, the drying time extends to an hour. The final consistency is fantastic for sanding, and the bond is both strong and stable, preventing sink marks. Next, I'm evening out the surface of a soft nail file. The benefit of using a black glue is that it makes it easy to see where it's still present. The longer wing has a noticeable mold line, and I'm smoothing it out with a soft sponge sandpaper. The printing quality is great, but the flat surfaces tends to show the pronounced printing layers. I am removing monolithic plastic control bars. I will make it more detailed. The razor saw is great for separating parts, but is also handy for rescribing pan lines. I don't like the thick plastic flaps. They should be much thinner, like here. I am carefully taking off plastic using a hobby knife and sandpaper. The surface of a real machine is not uniform, and you can notice a crazy amount of rivets. Making uniform double lines is not an easy task. Nowadays exist riveting wheels that have a double or even triple wheels. Though it's a bit pricey, it will last you a lifetime in modeling. The blueprint with the rivets is sourced from Kajero publication. I printed 2 copies and cut them into smaller segments, which I used as templates for laying down the rivet lines. I recently purchased this tape from Temu. It is meant for scribing, but it works great as a guide for riveting. It is thicker than classic tape and primarily is transparent. I highly recommend making each rivet line according to template. It is almost impossible to make a straight line freehand in this scale. The spare cockpit canopy works like a spray mask. Before applying primer, clean the surface with isopropyl alcohol. The primer unifies the surface in one shade and primarily highlights imperfections like dust particles, sink marks or seam lines. The pan line on the flaps is thick, therefore I unify it with a dense primer. I have also noticed inconsistent pan lines on the wings, with some entirely missing. I rescribed the details with a scribing needle and razor saw. And of course, there are more rivets to add. The rivets add more details to the surface, but the Stuka is tricky. Now I would rather decide on 48 scale than 72. I primarily struggle with the spacing of the double lines. You cannot place the tape on the template line because the double wheel is thicker and the second line has a significant space indentation. In 72 scale, even half of a millimeter deviation is significant. In larger scale models, the tooth pitch is larger and the deviation could be also larger. Another problem is that the pan lines of the kit do not match the blueprints accurately, so you must make minor adjustments. The riveting is time consuming, but I guess it's worth the effort. I try to make the wheel connection pin the same as the model, but it doesn't fit seamlessly, so I need to smooth it out. The kit has control bars for flaps, but they are too thick. So cut them out and replace them with a metal wire, and also for rudder and trim flaps. In addition, I made a new pitot tube from hypodermic needles. The kit has a clear canopy split for open configuration, but its thickness prevents proper assembly. You can see how thin is the middle section. I looked for vacuum form parts for this kit, but the only ones available are for the B version. As a backup plan, I think I will try to thin the plastic using a grinder and then polishing up. I am removing plastic from inside because there are no decals. Then I smooth the sketches with a soft sandpaper. You can notice how thin the plastic needs to be for proper installation. The last step is to polish the plastic with a cotton polishing wheel and polishing compounds. I think the transparency after polishing is not the worst. I used 2-component epoxy putty to unify details and shapes of the new wheels. The kit comes with a mask for clear parts, but they are made from thick foil, making them tricky to place on the smaller round windows. Okay, the model is ready for painting. I use acrylic paints and an airbrush with a 0.2mm nozzle. This size is perfect for small models. I usually start with a yellow shade, since it often has a poor coverage. Flexible masking tape is essential for making round coaxial shapes. You can use electrical insulation tape as a cheap alternative. The underside is painted with a XF23. This color is a bit lighter than RLM65, but it will become darker after shading and weathering. The RLM70 and 71 colors can be a bit tricky, and you might need to mix them with other shades since Tamiya doesn't offer these specific colors. Tamiya has XF27, but is too dark for 72 scale, so a slight adjustment to the shade is necessary. Or you can simply buy accurate shades from other brands like Mr. Color, AK, Mr. Paint or MIG. Funny that each company has it different. The RLM70 and 71 are among the most mysterious paint schemes of World War II. German camouflage consists of geometric shapes. The masking is therefore easier when rounded. Be sure to apply your paint in soft layers. The thicker layer might seep underneath the masking tape. And minor shading with a lighter green paint. Make it when the mask is still on. The light green shading can be made even after unmasking, since it will not affect the dark shade significantly. I am applying clear varnish. It will protect the paint job and make the surface smoother. I use resilient super clear free varnish and leveling thinner for dilution. The ratio is 1 part of the varnish and 4 or 5 parts of the thinner, otherwise it might result in orange peel texture. Okay, now the funny part. Winter is coming. I strongly recommend testing new techniques on old models or even plastic board. This approach can really save you a lot of headaches down the line. First up, let's discuss chipping varnish and acrylic paint. In this scale, chipping often looks too sharp and unrealistic, as the real paint actually gets worn away rather than actually chip off. I also attempt to wipe off enamel paint using a thinner, but creating soft scratches proved to be challenging. While this technique may work well for larger scales, it is not suitable for 72. Now some historical background. Winter camouflage was often sprayed on larger airfields or applied with a brush to further bases and during combat conditions. This white paint was intended to be temporary and could be removed when necessary. As a result, it wasn't very durable and after a few missions it tends to show signs of wear. Therefore, I purchased this VMS water-based chipping paint. I only added a few drops of water to thin it, and a drop of Vallejo beige to tone down the bright white shade. I am spraying several soft layers using a high pressure of 30 psi, which helped achieve a smoother coating. The final layer does not need to be completely uniform. The drying time is almost instant, so after painting you can start working on weathering. The weathering is primarily around the engine, wheels, cockpit and access panels. I am carefully removing the top white layer using a water and soft brush, aiming to achieve an effect similar to the reference photos. For small scratches I use a toothpick, while a cotton swab helps create a more pronounced effect. This paint makes the entire process much easier and is particularly well suited for this small scale. When you compare this effect to chipping, the difference is striking. I really enjoyed this process and I don't think it will be my last aircraft model featuring winter camouflage. Although it is time consuming to paint the entire model and then layer it again with a white paint, the final outcome is worth the effort. If you are satisfied with the result, you must fix the chipping paint with a clear varnish. It will make it resilient against water and other weathering chemicals. Therefore, you can apply water slide decals without worrying about removing more paint. The Decals chemicals helps to unify them with the surface and copy underlying details. The German Junkers Jumo engine is well detailed, even with a spark plug wears. I am only a bit confused by Ayers manual, which shows all the parts in one step, with an arrow pointing to where to place them. It looks like you can put them anywhere. To guide my work, I refer to various photo references and larger scale kits. During my visit to Polish Aviation Museum, I discovered a fantastic collection of engines, including the Junkers U-Mod 211. I snapped a few photos, but serves as excellent references. Therefore, I painted small details like bolts or wires according to it. Using a strong highlights helps to add depth to details. I am using matte varnish to unify the decals and improve the surface for weathering application. After unmasking, I noticed that some dust from spraying got trapped underneath. Fortunately, I can easily wipe away the acrylic paint with a toothpick or cotton swab. The next step is to add some dirt. I know it looks already dirty, but it needs more oil leaks, shading and exhaust stains. I am mixing oil paints with enamel thinner for this process. The wash is highly diluted and makes subtle shading. You can apply it to panel lines or for a stronger effect on the whole surface. It is a handy approach if you have rivet lines. I am not wiping the paint from the surface entirely and only smoothing and blending the effect with a clear brush and enamel thinner. The drying time for oil paints is about 1 day, so we will let the color set before finalizing the remaining details. The propeller can also have some weathering. I am spraying a silver layer first. To facilitate easier paint chipping, I applied a light coat of chipping varnish. This chipping varnish helps in removing the top green layer easily with just a toothpick and little water. I must drill out a small groove for the full open configuration. It is according to the real machine. At last, it fits perfectly. The gun barrels and muzzle brake included in the kit are simplified due to complexity of the original design. To address this, I designed and printed new parts that offers greater accuracy. While the kit comes with 37mm cannons, the Ayers detail set provides more options. I painted the camouflage pattern to match the rest of the surface. The Stuka G-2 equipped with 37mm cannons has gained popularity because of its crazy appearance. But it becomes famous also thanks to Hans Ulrich Rudel, a legendary Luftwaffe pilot known for his remarkable combat achievements. By 1945, he had flown more than 2,500 sorties, claiming he destroyed 1 battleship, 1 cruiser, 1 destroyer, 70 landing crafts, 800 vehicles, 150 gun positions, 519 tanks and 9 aircraft. which is a better score than I have in the War Thunder. The last remaining details are tiny wires and cables. There are 4 of them for each cannon and many of them in the engine section. I use lead wires of 0.5, 0.3 and 0.2 mm. The lead material is soft and easy to shape, therefore I like to use it. And I use super glue for attaching. You can notice how simple details like wires make the engine more interesting. Primarily you can bring more paints like blue, yellow or red. I cannot forget to make accumulated dirt from exhaust nozzles. I use highly diluted mix of black and brown paint. Do not use pure black because it creates too strong a color contrast. Even the stains are not usually uniform and are typically scratched or wiped off during maintenance. I use a small amount of lacquer thinner, which nicely dilutes the acrylic paint. But do not use it too much because you can wipe out the paint on the base plastic. The underside of the aircraft often shows many oil leaks from the engine. For this effect, oil paint works best, as it can be blended seamlessly. With all these details in place, the model is finally complete. I was a bit skeptical about the winter camouflage since it was my first attempt, but I think it is not the worst for the first try. The academic kit is nice, but it does require some minor modifications to achieve a decent outcome. I found myself cursing my decision during the build for not going with a larger 48 scale kit from Hasegawa, Italy or Airframe, which would be much easier to work with. I opted for a 72 scale because I snagged the Ayers detail set at the discount and I wanted to create a diorama. Hopefully you found something useful in this process. Thank you for your patience and watching. Of course, a heartfelt thanks to my patrons for their incredible support. See you next time!